I was standing outside my parents' living room door, still wearing the black coat from the funeral, when I heard my father say my name, in a tone I had never heard before, flat, calculating, almost cold. My hand froze on the doorknob. My heart was still pounding from the lawyer's words echoing in my head. $30 million. A Miami beachfront property. Everything left to me. I had come home ready to tell them the truth. But then my sister laughed softly and said, "If she got the money. We just need her to trust us, she always does." And suddenly I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Because in that moment I realized they weren't grieving. They were planning. The rain had followed me all the way home from the cemetery, thin and persistent, the kind that soaked through fabric without you noticing. My boots left damp prints across the front porch, as I stood there staring at the familiar white door I'd walked through 1,000 times growing up. Everything looked the same. The chipped paint near the handle, the wind chime my mother never took down, the faint smell of cinnamon drifting from inside. For a second I almost believed nothing had changed. That I could walk in, sit down and tell them everything. That maybe, just maybe, they would be proud of me for once. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced down. It was the lawyer's message, "Call me if anything feels uncomfortable. Your grandfather anticipated pressure." I locked the screen without replying. Grandfather. Even now the word felt strange. To everyone else he had been a distant, quiet man who lived alone and rarely visited. To me, he had been the only person in the family who never asked me why I joined the army, never questioned my decisions, never compared me to my older brother. He used to send handwritten letters while I was deployed, short notes about the weather, the news, and once a clipping about a beachfront property in Miami. He joked he'd retire to someday. I didn't know he already owned it. I didn't know he'd left it to me. I reached for the doorknob again. That was when I heard my brother's voice from inside. She better not have gotten anything. I mean, she barely visited him. My hand stopped. My mother replied, her voice softer, cautious. "We don't know that yet. The lawyer hasn't contacted us." A chair creaked. I imagined them sitting around the dining table, my father at the head, my brother leaning back, my sister scrolling her phone. The same positions they'd taken every holiday, every family discussion, every moment where I'd sat quietly at the edge of the room. Then my father spoke. "If he left her something, we'll handle it. She doesn't understand money. She never has." My chest tightened. My sister let out a small laugh. "She still uses the same bank account she opened in high school. You really think she knows what to do with millions?" Millions. So they were already assuming. I leaned closer to the door without realizing it, my shoulder brushing the wood. My heart was beating so loudly I was afraid they might hear it. My brother lowered his voice. "We should suggest she invest with me. I can say I need capital for the expansion. Family helping family. And we manage the property," my father added calmly, "if there is one." My mother hesitated. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." But my father continued unmoved. "She trusts us. She always has. We just need to guide her." Guide. The word landed like something heavy inside my stomach. I thought about the envelope still in my bag, the documents, the trust, the clause clearly stating the assets were mine alone, protected. My grandfather had made sure of that. He had even included a note in his handwriting, "They may try to convince you. Listen carefully before you decide." My sister's voice cut through my thoughts. "Honestly, she owes us. Dad paid for her college." My breath caught. That wasn't true. I had taken loans. I had worked night shifts. I had enlisted partly to cover the debt. They knew that. They had watched me struggle. Yet now they were rewriting the past as if it had always belonged to them. My brother agreed immediately. "Exactly. And Mom helped with her car. She wouldn't even have gotten to training without us." Another lie. The car had been used, bought with my own savings. I remembered counting cash in my bedroom, terrified I wouldn't have enough. My father exhaled slowly like he was concluding a meeting. "We won't push too hard. Just suggest. She'll fold. She always does." Something inside me went very still. I stared at the door, at my reflection, faintly visible in the glass panel beside it. My face looked pale, older than I felt. There was still a crease across my sleeve from where I'd folded my arms at the cemetery. My grandfather had been buried less than 3 hours ago. And already they were dividing something they didn't even know existed. My phone vibrated again. This time I ignored it completely. Inside, my mother spoke again, quieter. "She's still our daughter. Let's not treat her like—" "No one's treating her badly," my father interrupted. "We're protecting her, and honestly, she's never been good with decisions." I almost laughed at that, but the sound stayed trapped in my throat. I thought about the deployments, the intelligence briefings, the lives that depended on choices made in seconds. But here in this house, I was still the youngest child who needed guidance. My sister asked, "Should we ask her directly?" "No," my father said. "Wait, let her tell us. If she doesn't, then we know she's hiding something." Silence followed. I could hear the faint ticking of the kitchen clock, the rain tapping against the gutter. I realized my hand was still gripping the doorknob. My knuckles had turned white. I had come here ready to share everything, ready to believe for one brief moment that maybe this inheritance could finally make me part of the family in a different way, that maybe they would look at me with respect. Instead, I was standing outside listening to them plan how to take control of something they assumed I couldn't handle. My heartbeat slowed, but only because something colder replaced it. Not anger, at least not yet, just clarity. I released the doorknob quietly. Then after a long breath, I turned it and stepped inside. Their conversation stopped instantly. 4 pairs of eyes looked up at me, surprised sympathy, practiced sadness. My mother stood first, walking quickly toward me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "You're home," she whispered. I nodded, letting her hug me. My father rose from his chair, his expression composed. My brother gave a small, solemn nod. My sister wiped at her eyes, though I hadn't seen any tears before. "Funeral okay?" my father asked. "Yes," I said. My voice sounded calm, too calm. "No one asked about the lawyer. No one asked about the will." "And I didn't tell them." "Not yet." No one asked me what the lawyer had said, but I could feel the question hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. It wasn't in their words, it was in the way my father studied my face, in the way my brother kept glancing at my bag, and how my sister suddenly seemed unusually attentive. They were waiting, measuring, trying to decide whether I was carrying something valuable, even if they didn't yet know what it was. I hung my coat carefully on the rack by the door. The fabric was still damp from the rain, and a faint smell of wet wool rose into the room. My mother moved toward the kitchen immediately. "I made soup," she said too quickly. "You must be exhausted." That alone told me everything. My mother rarely cooked on weekdays, certainly not my favorite. "I'm okay," I replied, but she had already disappeared into the kitchen. My father gestured toward the table. "Sit, we should talk." The same tone he used when I was 17 and told him I wanted to enlist. Calm, controlled, disapproving. I sat down anyway. My brother leaned forward, elbows on the table, fingers loosely interlocked. He looked concerned, but there was a brightness in his eyes I hadn't noticed before. Anticipation. "How was it?" he asked. "Quiet," I said. "Not many people." "Did the lawyer show up?" my sister asked casually, as if the question had just occurred to her. I met her gaze. She held it for a second too long. "Yes." My father's fingers tapped once against the table. A small, involuntary movement. "Anything we should know." There it was, direct but framed as concern. I shook my head slightly. He just handed me some personal items, letters, a watch. My brother leaned back, exhaling softly. My sister's shoulders relaxed. My father nodded once slowly, like he was confirming something. "Your grandfather always kept things simple," he said. Simple. $30 million and a beachfront property in Miami did not feel simple. But I didn't correct him. My mother returned with bowls of soup, setting one in front of me. Steam rose in soft curls. I picked up the spoon mostly to give myself something to do. The broth tasted warm, familiar. For a moment, I almost let the comfort reach me. Almost. "So, no estate complications?" my brother asked. I glanced up. "No." He nodded, satisfied. "That's good. Keeps things clean." Clean. The word echoed strangely, as if money would have complicated things, except they had already begun complicating them in their heads. My father folded his hands. "You'll be staying a few days." "A week," I said, "before I report back." He nodded again. "Good. We don't see you enough." The irony almost made me smile. My sister leaned forward. "You know, Emily, you could always transfer closer. There's a base 2 hours from here." I stirred the soup slowly. That's not really how assignments work. But you could try, she insisted. Being near family matters. I wondered if she hurt herself. My brother chimed in, his tone lighter. Plus, you'd save money staying here, no rent, no expenses. You could really build something. Build something. I looked at him. I'm doing fine. Sure, he said quickly. I just mean long term. My father watched the exchange silently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't correct them. He just observed like he was assessing a negotiation. I took another spoonful of soup. My hand felt steady now. The initial shock from outside the door had settled into something quieter, sharper. I could see them more clearly than I ever had before. Not as villains, not as monsters, just as people calculating what they believed was practical. That almost made it worse. My mother sat beside me. You look tired, she said gently. You should rest. I will. She hesitated. Did he say anything before, I knew she meant before my grandfather died. He said I should take care of myself, I answered truthfully. My father nodded. Good advice. Silence fell again. The clock ticked. My brother checked his phone. My sister reached for her glass of water, then set it down without drinking. They were done fishing for now. I finished half the soup and stood. I'm going to unpack. My mother squeezed my arm. Your old room is ready. Of course it was. She had prepared for me to stay. Or perhaps she had prepared for something else. I walked down the hallway slowly. Every step felt heavier than the last. The house hadn't changed, the same framed photos, the same faint creak in the floorboard near the bathroom, the same narrow window that looked out toward the backyard. But everything felt smaller, like I had outgrown it in ways I hadn't noticed before. My old room smelled faintly of laundry detergent. The bed was neatly made. A folded blanket rested at the foot. My duffel bag sat on the chair where I'd left it last year. I closed the door behind me. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled. For a moment I just listened, the muffled sounds of dishes clinking in the kitchen, my brother's voice low, my father's deeper tone, life continuing normal, ordinary. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope. The documents inside were thick, official, precise. My name printed clearly across each page, the trust structure, the asset valuation, the property address in Miami oceanfront, private access, fully paid. $30 million. The number still didn't feel real. I flipped to the handwritten note tucked inside. Emily, I know your family. I also know you. You'll want to share. You'll want to make things easier for them. But I didn't leave this to them. I left it to you. Use it to build the life you were never allowed to choose. My throat tightened. I folded the note carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Then I heard footsteps outside my door. A pause. A soft knock. Emily, my father's voice. I slid the envelope back into my bag before answering. Yeah. He opened the door halfway, just checking in. I'm fine. He looked around the room briefly, then back at me. You don't have to carry everything alone. I almost laughed at that, but instead I nodded. I know. He hesitated, then added, if anything comes up, financially or otherwise, you can always talk to me. There it was again. I held his gaze. I will. He gave a small approving nod, then closed the door. I waited until his footsteps faded. Then I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling. My heartbeat had finally slowed. The shock had passed. The grief from the funeral felt distant, now replaced by something quieter, but more solid. I understood what my grandfather meant. They hadn't changed overnight, nothing dramatic had happened. But the way they looked at me, the careful questions, the subtle suggestions, it had already begun. They were preparing, and now so was I. I woke before sunrise the way I always did on base, even though there was no reason to. For a few seconds I forgot where I was. The ceiling above me was lower than I was used to, painted the same off-white color it had been since I was 16. The faint hum of the old house heater replaced the distant mechanical sounds I normally heard in the barracks. Then the memories from the night before returned, my father's voice behind the door, my sister's laugh. My brother's careful questions, and the stillness inside me settled again. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet. Growing up, mornings like this had always been peaceful. Before everyone woke up, before comparisons, expectations, and quiet disappointments filled the house. Back then, I used to sit at this same window and imagine leaving. Not dramatically, just quietly, a different life, a different version of myself. The army had given me that. Discipline, distance, a place where I wasn't the youngest, the unpredictable one. The daughter who made strange decisions. Here I was, still all of those things. I got dressed and stepped into the hallway. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen. My father was already awake, seated at the table with the newspaper folded neatly in front of him. He looked up as I entered, his expression neutral. "You're up early," he said. "Habit." He nodded once. "Coffee." "Please." He poured it without asking how I took it. He still remembered. That more than anything made my chest tighten slightly. He wasn't cruel. He never had been. That was the hardest part. He just never saw me the way he saw the others. My brother's voice came from the living room. He was already on a call, speaking in a low, urgent tone about a shipment delay. My sister walked in a moment later, tying her hair back, still half asleep. "Morning," she said, glancing at me. "Morning." She poured cereal, sat down, then looked at me again. "You heading back soon?" "In a week." She nodded. "Must be nice, always moving, no roots." I took a sip of coffee. "It's just different." She shrugged. "I could never live like that." My father folded his newspaper carefully. "Stability matters, especially long-term." There it was again, not criticism, not exactly, just a quiet judgment wrapped in practicality. I remembered the first time I told them I wanted to enlist. I had been standing in the same kitchen holding the brochure, my hands shaking slightly. My brother had just been accepted into a business program. My sister was already working at a local firm. I had expected resistance, but not the silence that followed. "You're throwing away your potential," my father had finally said. My mother had asked if something was wrong. My brother had laughed, thinking I was joking. Only my grandfather had said, "She'll learn things none of you ever will." That night I packed my bag alone. The present returned when my brother ended his call and joined us. He looked tired, rubbing his eyes. "Long morning already," he muttered. "Work?" my father asked. "Yeah, cash flow issues." He glanced at me briefly. "Nothing major." I nodded, not commenting, but I noticed the tension in his shoulders. My sister leaned forward. "Did the bank approve the extension?" He shook his head, still waiting. The conversation shifted into numbers, expenses, projections, clients. I listened quietly, absorbing more than they probably realized. My brother's business was struggling. My sister mentioned delays at her firm. My father spoke about rising costs at his own investment. They were all under pressure. I thought about the envelope in my bag upstairs. $30 million. Enough to erase every worry they were discussing. Enough to stabilize everything. I felt the familiar pull, share it, help them make things easier. That instinct had always been there. The desire to finally be useful. Then I remembered the night before. The plan. The assumptions. The way they spoke about me as if I were predictable, manageable. I set my cup down gently. "I'm going for a run," I said. My father nodded. "Good idea." Outside the air was cool and damp. The rain had stopped, leaving the street quiet and reflective. I ran the same route I used to take in high school, past the park, past the closed bakery, past the mailbox where my grandfather used to leave letters for me. My breathing settled into rhythm. Movement always helped me think. By the time I slowed near the park bench, my mind was clearer. They didn't hate me. They just didn't believe in me. And maybe they never had. I sat down, catching my breath. A memory surfaced: my brother's graduation dinner, my father giving a speech about leadership, ambition, success, my sister's promotion celebration, my mother crying with pride. My own enlistment day had been quieter. A handshake, a short goodbye. My father saying, "Call if you change your mind." I never did. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of wet grass. I looked at the empty playground. For the first time, I realized something that felt both painful and freeing. I had spent years trying to earn something that had never been offered. Respect. Belief. Trust. My grandfather had seen that. That's why he left everything to me, not as a reward, but as protection. I stood and began jogging back. When I reached the house, my sister was on the phone near the doorway. She lowered her voice as I approached. "She's still here. I don't think she got anything," she whispered. She turned and saw me. Her expression shifted instantly. "Hey, good run." "Yeah." She ended the call quickly. "Just work." "Of course." Inside, my father and brother were discussing numbers again. They stopped briefly when I entered, then resumed. I walked past them, heading toward the stairs. As I reached the top, I heard my brother say quietly, "If she didn't inherit anything, we're on our own." My father replied, "Then we adapt." No disappointment, no concern, just calculation. I closed my bedroom door softly. For the first time, I didn't feel hurt, just certain. They weren't waiting for me. They were waiting for what I might have. And now I understood my place. By the third day, the house had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. My mother cooked more than usual, my father lingered longer at the table, and my brother and sister seemed to orbit me in small, subtle ways. Nothing obvious, nothing that could be called suspicious. But I noticed everything. The extra questions, the careful pauses, the way conversations shifted when I entered the room. They were still trying to read me. So I decided to give them something simple to read. That morning I came downstairs with my duffel bag and set it near the door. My father glanced at it immediately. My brother followed his gaze. My sister pretended not to notice. "You heading out?" my mother asked. "Just meeting someone," I said. Who my brother asked too quickly. I met his eyes, the lawyer. The silence that followed was almost physical. My father straightened slightly in his chair. My sister's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "Everything okay?" my mother asked. "Yeah," I said calmly. "He forgot to give me something." "What kind of something?" my father asked. I shrugged. "Just paperwork, personal stuff." My brother leaned back, trying to look casual. "You sure that's all?" "Yes." My father studied my face. I let him. I kept my expression neutral, almost bored. After a moment, he nodded. "All right," he said. I picked up my keys and left. The lawyer's office was quiet, understated, exactly the kind of place that didn't draw attention. He greeted me with a firm handshake and a look that told me he already suspected why I was there. "They're asking questions," I said. He nodded. That was expected. I told them I didn't inherit anything. He watched me carefully, and I'm going to keep it that way. For the first time, he smiled slightly. "Your grandfather would approve." He walked me through the trust structure again, how the assets were shielded, how no one could claim access, how any transfer would require my explicit authorization. Everything was airtight. My grandfather hadn't left room for ambiguity. "There's one more thing," the lawyer said, sliding a folder across the desk. "Your grandfather anticipated pressure. He included documentation showing the assets are already placed in a managed structure. If anyone attempts to influence you, you have legal protection." I opened the folder. Statements, property records, financial instruments, everything in my name but untouchable without my decision. I closed it slowly. Good. When I returned home, the atmosphere shifted the moment I stepped inside. My sister looked up from the couch. My brother stood near the kitchen. My father was by the window pretending to check his phone. "How'd it go?" my mother asked. "Fine," I said, placing my keys on the counter. My brother crossed his arms. "Nothing major." "Number?" My father nodded, once satisfied. "Good." That was all. No follow-up questions. No probing. But something else changed, something subtle. The tension eased. The careful attention softened. The invisible spotlight moved away from me. They believed me. That evening, my brother mentioned his business again. This time, the tone was different, less cautious, more resigned. "Things are tight," he admitted. "But I'll figure it out." My father nodded. "You always do." My sister talked about her firm's restructuring. My mother worried about rising bills. The conversation flowed without circling back to me. I listened quietly. Without the possibility of money, I had become background again. And strangely, that hurt more than the planning I had overheard, because now I saw the contrast clearly. When they thought I might have something, I mattered. When they believed I didn't, I faded. Later that night, my father knocked on my door again. "You busy?" he asked. "Number." He stepped inside, leaning lightly against the dresser. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you came home, even if it's only for a week." I nodded. "Me too." He hesitated. "You're doing well, right, financially?" There it was again, one last check. "I'm fine," I said. He exhaled quietly, almost relieved. "Good, that's good." He left without another word. I sat on the bed staring at the closed door. His relief wasn't about me, it was about expectations. If I had nothing, there was nothing to negotiate, nothing to manage. Downstairs, I could hear my brother laughing at something on TV. My sister joined in. My mother's voice floated in from the kitchen. The house sounded warm, familiar, peaceful. But now I understood the peace had conditions. The next morning I woke to raised voices, not angry, just tense. I stepped into the hallway and heard my brother speaking. "I need another month," he said. My father replied, "That's not sustainable." "I know, I'm trying." My sister added, "Maybe you should sell the second location." "I can't, not yet." I leaned against the wall listening. Their problems were real, their stress genuine. For a moment the old instinct returned, tell them, help them fix everything. $30 million could do that. But then I remembered the conversation behind the door, the way they assumed control, the way they framed it as guidance, the way they rewrote the past to justify taking something that wasn't theirs. I stepped back into my room quietly. That afternoon my mother asked if I wanted to stay longer. My sister suggested I visit more often. My brother asked about my next assignment. All ordinary questions. No pressure, no calculation. Because as far as they knew, there was nothing to gain. I smiled, answered calmly, and kept the truth to myself. For the first time, I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was simply watching, learning who they were when they believed I had nothing. And the clearer it became, the more certain I felt. I had made the right decision. The shift didn't happen all at once. It began with small things requests that sounded harmless, casual, almost accidental. My sister asking if I could look over a contract because you're good with details. My brother mentioning his bank meeting and wondering aloud how military relocation allowances worked. My father bringing up investment articles during dinner as if we were simply discussing the news. None of it directly involved money, not yet. But I recognized the pattern. They were testing the edges, probing to see if I might still be useful in ways they hadn't considered. It started on a Thursday afternoon. I was sitting at the kitchen table going through emails from base when my brother dropped into the chair across from me. He rubbed the back of his neck, exhaling heavily. "You ever deal with banks when you were deployed?" he asked. I looked up. "Depends. What kind of situation?" "Just restructuring, short-term liquidity stuff." He shrugged. "Nothing major." I nodded slowly. "They usually care about collateral." "Yeah," he said. "That's the problem." He didn't say anything else. Just sat there waiting. I could almost see the calculation behind his eyes, how far he could push without sounding like he was asking for help. "I'm sure you'll figure it out," I said. He forced a small smile. "Yeah, I always do." He stood and left. The conversation ended, but the air felt different afterward. The distance from the previous days was closing. Not because they thought I had money, because they were realizing they needed something, and I was the only variable left. That evening, my sister joined me on the back porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft orange streaks. She leaned against the railing beside me. "You always seem calm," she said. "Training," I replied. She nodded. "I wish I had that. Work's been unstable." "I'm sorry." She sighed. "They're cutting positions. I might have to move." "Where?" "Not sure. Somewhere cheaper." She glanced at me. "You're lucky. The military takes care of housing, right?" "Sometimes." She kicked lightly at the porch step. "Must be nice not worrying about mortgages." I didn't answer. She waited a second, then smiled faintly. "Anyway, just thinking out loud." When she went inside, I stayed there listening to the quiet. The requests weren't direct, but they were building. Each conversation layered onto the last, forming something inevitable. The next morning, my father asked me to join him for coffee at the local diner. That alone was unusual. He rarely invited me anywhere alone. We sat in a booth near the window. He stirred his coffee slowly. "You've always been disciplined," he said. I nodded. "It's part of the job." He leaned back. "Your brother, he's talented, but he takes risks, sometimes too many." "I know." "He'll recover," my father added, "but it might take time." I watched him carefully. "You're worried." "I'm practical," he corrected. The waitress set down our plates. He waited until she left before continuing. "Family helps family," he said quietly. There it was. I didn't respond immediately, I just cut my toast buying time. What kind of help? I asked. Guidance, support, stability. He shrugged. You've always been steady. I met his eyes. I don't have anything to offer right now. He nodded quickly. Of course, I didn't mean financially. But the pause after financially lingered too long. We finished breakfast in silence. When we left, he placed his hand briefly on my shoulder. You've grown, he said. I wasn't sure whether that was approval or assessment. By the time we returned home, my brother was pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear. His voice was strained. I need another extension, he said. Just 30 days. He saw us and turned away slightly. My father didn't comment. He simply walked past him and into the kitchen. Later that afternoon, my brother approached me again. This time he didn't sit. He stood near the doorway. Hey, he said, random question. Okay. If someone wanted to co-sign something, military credit helps, right? I shook my head gently. I don't co-sign. He nodded immediately. Yeah, didn't think you would. But his shoulders sagged slightly before he turned away. That night, the tension in the house thickened. My sister stayed quiet. My mother hovered between rooms. My father watched everything without speaking. They were all under pressure now. And slowly they were circling back to me, not because they thought I had money, but because they were running out of options. The next morning, my mother knocked softly on my door. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded. She sat beside me, hands folded tightly. Your brother's struggling. Your sister too. Your father's investments. They're tied up. I know. She looked at me carefully. You've always been the steady one, the one who doesn't panic. I didn't answer. She hesitated. If there's anything you can do, even advice, it would help. Advice? I nodded slowly. I'll think about it. She smiled with visible relief. That's all I'm asking. When she left, I stared at the closed door. The pattern had fully formed now. They weren't manipulating aggressively. They weren't demanding. They were simply leaning on me emotionally, gradually hoping I would step forward on my own. That had always been their method. And for years I had stepped forward. But not this time. Because I finally understood something my grandfather had known long before I did, they didn't want me. They wanted what I could provide. And now, even believing I had nothing, they were still reaching. Which meant if they ever discovered the truth, they wouldn't just reach. They would grab. The call came the next afternoon while I was folding my uniform in my room. I recognized the lawyer's number immediately. Something in my chest tightened before I even answered. Emily, he said, his voice measured but more serious than usual. I need to inform you of something. Your father contacted my office this morning. I stopped moving. What did he ask? He didn't mention your name directly. He said he was trying to clarify whether there had been any outstanding legal matters connected to your grandfather's estate. He framed it as family housekeeping. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed, and I told him I couldn't disclose anything, but he was persistent. He asked whether any individual beneficiaries had been assigned outside immediate heirs. My pulse quickened, so he's suspicious. Yes, and he may continue digging. I looked toward the door, suddenly aware of every sound in the house. My brother's voice downstairs, the television, the faint clink of dishes. Life continuing, unaware that something had shifted again. What should I do? I asked. Nothing yet, the lawyer replied. You're fully protected, but I thought you should know. Your grandfather anticipated this possibility. He paused, then added, there's also something else. He left a recorded message. It was meant to be delivered only if you felt pressure from family. I closed my eyes briefly. Send it. It's already in your secure folder. After the call ended, I opened my laptop. The file sat there, labeled simply, for Emily if needed. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a second before I clicked. The video loaded slowly. Then my grandfather appeared seated in his familiar armchair, the ocean faintly visible behind him. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were clear. Emily, he said, his voice calm. If you're watching this, it means you're facing something I worried about. My throat tightened. I didn't leave this to you by accident, he continued. I've watched how your family treats you. Not cruelly, but carefully. You're useful when you give, invisible when you don't. I didn't want that to follow you forever. He leaned forward slightly. They will ask. Maybe gently, maybe indirectly. They may even believe they're helping you. But this is your life, your independence. Don't trade it for approval." The video ended. I sat there for a long moment, the quiet filling the room. He had understood everything, long before I did. A knock sounded at my door. I closed the laptop quickly. "Yeah." My sister stepped in. "Dad wants everyone downstairs." "Okay." When I reached the living room, they were all there. My father stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. My brother leaned against the couch. My mother sat quietly. The atmosphere felt heavier than usual. My father gestured for me to sit. "We need to talk," he said. I did. He cleared his throat. "Your grandfather's estate. I made a few calls today." I kept my expression neutral. "There were some irregularities," he continued. "It seems there may have been private arrangements." My brother looked at me. My sister did the same. And I asked. My father watched me carefully. "If something was left outside the standard structure, we should know, as a family." The word family hung in the air. I wasn't informed of anything, I said calmly. He studied my face, searching. "You're sure?" "Yes." He nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't fully believe me. My brother shifted. "Look, Emily, if there is something, we're not trying to take it. We just want transparency." "Transparency." My sister added softly, "We're all struggling right now. It would help to understand." I felt the familiar pull again, explain, reassure, share. But my grandfather's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't trade it for approval." "I don't have anything to add," I said. Silence followed. My father exhaled quietly. "All right." The conversation ended, but the room felt colder afterward. The subtle warmth from previous days faded. Suspicion replaced it. They weren't certain, but they were no longer convinced I had nothing. That night I heard my brother pacing again. My sister spoke in hushed tones with my mother. My father stayed in his study longer than usual. They were searching now. The next morning my father approached me before breakfast. "If there is something, Emily," he said quietly, "keeping it from us doesn't help anyone." I met his eyes. "There's nothing." He nodded, but his expression hardened slightly. For the first time I saw disappointment, not because I had failed them, but because they believed I wasn't being honest. And that changed everything. They stopped being careful. The conversations became sharper. My brother's frustration surfaced more openly. My sister's patience thinned. My father watched me with quiet calculation. They were no longer waiting. They were preparing for the possibility that I had lied. And I realized something then: if they found out the truth on their own, it wouldn't be a conversation. It would be a confrontation. The tension in the house didn't explode. It tightened, quietly, steadily, like a rope pulled a little more each day. By the sixth night, no one pretended things were normal anymore. Conversations were shorter. My brother avoided eye contact. My sister watched me in silence. My father spoke only when necessary, his tone measured, distant. The warmth from earlier in the week had disappeared completely. I knew this was the moment my grandfather had anticipated. And I also knew I couldn't leave like this quietly without resolution. Because if I did, they would keep digging. They would keep assuming. They would keep building a story about me that wasn't true. So I decided to end it myself. That evening I asked them all to sit down after dinner. My mother looked surprised. My father immediately sensed something serious. My brother and sister exchanged a glance. We gathered around the same table where I had overheard them days earlier. I folded my hands in front of me, keeping my voice calm. "I need to tell you something." My father nodded once. "Go ahead." I took a slow breath. Grandfather did leave me something. The reaction was immediate. My sister's eyes widened. My brother leaned forward. My mother froze. My father's expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened. "I knew it," my brother whispered. My father spoke carefully. "What did he leave you?" I looked at each of them one by one. "A retirement fund and a property." "How much?" my sister asked. "30 million?" The room fell completely silent. Even the clock seemed to stop. My brother's mouth opened slightly. My mother pressed her hand against her chest. My sister stared at me, unmoving. My father remained still, but I saw the flicker in his eyes, shock, quickly followed by calculation. "And the property?" he asked. "Miami, beachfront." My brother let out a soft breath that sounded almost like disbelief. That's incredible." My mother whispered, "He never told us." No, I said quietly. He didn't. My father leaned forward slightly. Why didn't you tell us? I met his gaze. Because I heard you, the night I came home. The words landed heavier than anything else I'd said. My sister blinked. Heard... what? I was outside the door. You were discussing what to do if I inherited something, how you'd manage it, how I didn't understand money, how I owed you. No one spoke. My brother shifted uncomfortably. My mother looked down. My father's jaw tightened. My sister started... planning, I finished gently. My father inhaled slowly. Emily, that wasn't. I know, I said. You thought you were helping. You always do. The calmness in my voice seemed to unsettle them more than anger would have. My brother leaned forward. Look, that doesn't mean we want to take anything. We're just... family, I said softly. He nodded. Exactly. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Grandfather anticipated that too. My father frowned slightly. What is this? The trust documents. He opened the folder. His eyes moved quickly across the pages. Then slower. Then he stopped completely. It's locked, he said quietly. Yes? No joint management, no transfers without authorization. He looked up at me. You can't even share it casually. That's right. My sister leaned closer. So, what does that mean? It means it's mine, I said. Silence returned. My mother spoke first. Emily, we never meant to make you feel... I know, I said gently. You just didn't trust me. My brother shook his head. That's not fair. It is, I replied, but it's okay. My father closed the folder slowly. So what happens now? I slid my house key onto the table. I'm leaving tomorrow. My mother looked startled. So soon? Yes. You don't have to, she said softly. I do. My father watched me carefully. And the money? I'm keeping it. The words felt simple, final. No anger, no accusation, just truth. My brother leaned back, exhaling slowly. My sister looked away. My mother's eyes filled slightly, though she didn't cry. My father nodded once, accepting something he couldn't change. You've made your decision, he said. Yes. We sat there for another moment, the silence no longer tense, just heavy with things that couldn't be undone. The next morning I packed quietly. My mother hugged me at the door, my brother shook my hand, my sister whispered goodbye. My father stood a few feet away, then stepped forward at the last second. You've grown into someone strong, he said. I had to, I replied. He nodded. I walked to my car. The morning air was cool, the sky clear. As I pulled away, the house grew smaller in the mirror. Not in anger, not in bitterness, just distance. A week later, I stood on the balcony of the Miami property, the ocean stretching endlessly in front of me. The air smelled of salt and sunlight. The waves moved in steady rhythm, calm and certain. For the first time, nothing felt conditional. No expectations, no comparisons, no quiet calculations. Just space. I thought about my grandfather's words, about the years I spent trying to earn something that was never freely given, about the moment outside that door when everything changed. Sometimes the hardest truth isn't that people don't love you. It's that they only know how to love what you provide. And sometimes walking away isn't revenge. It's freedom. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between family and your own independence, I'd really like to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from and whether you would have made the same decision. We share stories like this every day, and your voice helps keep them alive. If you want more moments like this, quiet, real, and deeply human, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Let's keep this journey going together.